Hello and welcome to this, the latest in a series of programmes brought to you by Deloitte. My name is Robert Bruce and I am a financial journalist. For half a decade, the annual Finance for the Future Awards have both recognised and celebrated the role which finance can play in creating sustainable businesses and in turn a sustainable economy, helping to build resilient organisations through embedding environmental and broader social issues into their decision making. And they have widened their role to include the worlds of investing and financing, as well as how organisations have communicated their use of integrated thinking. The awards were founded by the ICAEW and the Prince's Accounting for Sustainability project, A4S, and have since been joined by Deloitte as the major sponsor. Over the years, the case studies from the award winners have built up into a formidable series of examples for organisations all around the world to follow as they seek the benefits of linking finance and sustainability. With me today to discuss the awards and the change they have brought about are Jessica Rice, Executive Chairman of the Prince's Accounting for Sustainability project, A4S, and Alan Stewart, who is one of the lead judges on the awards programme and also Chief Finance Officer at Tesco. Can I start by asking you both why these awards have been so valuable and beneficial to the business community?
The awards are really one of the few that focuses specifically on celebrating the role that finance can play to create sustainable business, a sustainable economy. So whether it's large businesses and the role that the CFOs and finance teams can play, through to small businesses, public sector, and indeed how do you actually finance a sustainable business or a sustainable economy. Key word is finance and that contribution to sustainability.
No, I think as Jessica says, it's the linkage between the sustainability and finance, and that's finance as a function and finance also as a way of investing. So very critical focus, particularly on finance people.
Alan, you're a CFO. Can you tell us how critical the finance function is to this role?
I think one of the things which the more experience I get, the more I hear how finance is changing. But I think it's true that finance is changing. The role of finance, obviously the critical control element is still there, that was always there, but the forward-looking element, the linkage into the business, and particularly in the field of sustainability as companies and customers become more focused on the need for sustainable business and sustainable practices, so finance has an increasingly important part to play. And that's something which I've seen over a number of years now, and these awards really help put the focus on that.
Yeah. And I think when we were setting up the awards, what we found was, and even now, finance hasn't necessarily felt that it has that part to play, or front and centre. So I think what we really wanted to do with the awards was really celebrate that role that finance is playing and counter that view that we sometimes got from whether it was CEOs or others from the organisation who felt that finance were a blocker rather than actually making a positive contribution. And we saw so many examples of great action by finance in support of the wider organisational objectives. So I think the awards are great for really highlighting those case studies and bringing the stories to life. And
how has the role of the CFO changed?
Well, I think that the role of the CFO has always been a business partner, there to help focus the efforts and help people think about where things should be done. One of the things which businesses focus on are the key performance indicators, and helping finance, supporting finance in order to look at that from a sustainability perspective is something which has had great resonance in finance functions across all of the different businesses that we've seen in the awards.
Can you talk us through the idea of embedding sustainability into the world of finance?
So for me, and this connects to the work that we've done with Accounting for Sustainability and the CFO Leadership Network, whether you take the strategic planning process and that whole budgeting forecasting cycle, whether you think about something like CapEx, which of course has very long-term consequences for a business and for society as a whole, how are environmental and social issues and indeed economic issues at the heart of the decision-making process? And for me, that's the key of integration, is really thinking, what are you doing on a day-to-day basis? How can those types of issues really enhance the outcomes that are achieved?
And what have you learned, both of you, from the businesses which have done well in these awards?
If I think of a few of the examples that have stood out for me, and then Alan, maybe it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts as well. There have been some examples where an organisation has really embedded and developed a new sustainability strategy that the finance organisation has really been part and parcel of creating, and often really heavily involved in how do you actually monitor and measure success, both in the development stage of setting the targets and the outcomes you're trying to achieve, and then really driving an integrated strategy. On the other hand, we've had some organisations who have put forward case studies and examples of how they've done a project which has really, really embedded sustainability. So whether that's quite a few examples of really interesting, innovative ways of thinking about capital expenditure, and the ability to really measure the outcomes that they've achieved. And some of the winning entries have come from both of those, either really thinking about the whole organisation or about a specific project, as long as that project has the potential to be really material, really substantial for the organisation itself.
Yes, and I think what I'd add is the fact that this has to be something which finance has been a key instigator of and has been at the centre of. So when we're looking at the awards and looking at the entries, what we're looking for is something which has been led by finance in particular, not finance coming along to some initiative which another part of the organisation has asked for help on. It's really looking at that key development from finance and how finance is central to it. And you don't need to be a big company, you don't need to be a large established company. It can apply to all companies and all finance functions, and that for me has been what's been refreshing about it, the international nature, the small company size, the fact that we're looking at public companies, private companies, and covering all different industries. It's exciting to see how many people are interested in sustainability, even in the finance function, dare I say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And how has this worked for the not-for-profit and the public sector parts of the awards?
I think with the not-for-profit and the public sector, arguably sustainability can fit even more easily front and centre of the organisation, because the core purpose is ultimately often about social good. But that doesn't make it any less challenging for the finance team to really be driving the outcomes through, particularly where there are, as with many organisations, cost pressures or pressures to really perform from a financial perspective. So I think that in some ways there it becomes even more critical to be able to demonstrate how you are developing an integrated approach and how the finance and the social environmental outcomes can work hand in hand. And there have been some absolutely fantastic examples in that third sector and public sector space.
And the longer term view helps here.
Yes, and I think they sometimes have longer horizons, which is also helpful for businesses which perhaps have shorter horizons to help see how a longer horizon can change your analysis. And it's important to recognise that long-term impact, whether it's a cost or a increased investment you're going to make because you haven't really thought through the long-term impacts in the way that the public companies and not-for-profit companies can do.
How have things changed in the investing and financing sectors?
What we found in the first couple of years of the awards was that a lot of those who were involved in financing as opposed to the finance function were really interested in entering the awards and had some really great examples of how they were either financing and developing innovative financing mechanisms to increase the amount of sustainability or the integration of sustainability into the whatever they were investing in. And so what you wanted to create a specific category within the awards that really highlighted that kind of innovation. And again there I think you've seen some interesting examples from big mainstream, for want of a better word, asset managers who have developed innovative funds and innovative products to drive more sustainability, through to those who've been demonstrating how they can integrate sustainability across all of their investing activities, through to really innovative, more startup style financing approaches where you've really thought through a completely new business model, effectively, that is focused specifically on driving sustainable outcomes in the companies that they're investing in.
And I think it's the capital, whether it's provided externally or from within the company, has to be looked at as capital which needs to earn a return. And that's really where I think these investing businesses have got a huge part to play.
And how does this work?
For me, very much like the things we would look for from a finance team, that question of integration across the organisation is really fundamental. So how, through all of your financing activities, are you really thinking about how environmental and social risk and opportunity are at the heart? So it's not enough to have one niche ESG fund. It's really about how are you building those kind of criteria across all of the funds and across your strategies in organisations. So whether you're an asset manager or other parts of the investment chain involved in financing activities, that is the key. Some of the winners in the past have been those who've really set up the whole fund and pretty big funds with a core purpose around how do you really integrate ESG. Others have been mainstream finance houses and asset managers who've really been able to demonstrate that integration and the way that they're trying to think about environmental risk and opportunity across every fund that they have. And I think for me, that integration is going to be fundamental to whoever is able to win this year.
Is there a cost to companies which choose to invest in this space?
I would argue no. Separate to the awards through the CFO Leadership Network at the moment, we've got 2 projects that we're doing on financing, so one on debt financing and the other around the equity space. Arguably the evidence is that it actually costs you less to really be demonstrating to your investors a sustainable approach to investing, and for the a lot of the investors we work with would say the same, that actually it reduces the risk of the investment, highlights new opportunities, and for a company that is managing these issues well and in a strategic way, they're a much sounder investment, and you can see that much better quality management.
Yeah, and that's where some of the work we've done on understanding the capital approval process, helping develop different techniques for looking at the costs related to the investment that's being made, have really been helpful to push the thinking in finance and the broader business to a slightly different place than they would have been otherwise.
All of that is about communicating integrated thinking. What have you learned from this part of the process?
It was last year the communicating integrated thinking category, I think, was one of the most competitive and one of the most international. So it was very interesting to see the different approaches to how could you really capture that essence of what you were doing internally within the organisation and find a way to engage that wider audience on how are you actually really embedding it. How can you do that in a way that's credible, that's consistent year on year, that's consistent across different types of communication, because it's not just about the annual award, it's really how are you communicating an integrated approach across every form of communication. And I think you saw some interesting examples, some who were very much focused on the communication to the investors, but others who had a different structure and how they were communicating to their key, whether it was their owners or their key base of stakeholders.
I think the communication part is where the integrated reporting really touches the accounting for sustainability and the awards most directly. And in that sense, it's important also to have the differentiation between integrated reporting, which is very well established and very well known, and then bringing it back into this finance. So I think what Jessica said about the different ways that people look at that communication is something which is, again, refreshing. And in the awards, we see so many different approaches that what is exciting is the fact that people just, in a relatively blank canvas, are able to approach things in a very different way, which then becomes thought-provoking not only to us as judges, but hopefully to everybody else who's looking at the different people who are putting in entries for this.
And of course the awards have also gone global. What have you learned from that development?
For me, the entries that we've had, which have been really from every continent, just highlights how many innovative examples there are out there, and that an integrated approach to sustainability and leadership from the finance really can come from any part of the world, any sector, and in very different contexts. So you might have different challenges that you face in different industries or in different parts of the world, but the approach that finance can take to drive the integration is very much the same.
I think for me it highlights what we know, but it really just proves it, that sustainability is something which is important no matter where you are in the world and no matter what sort of business you're in. Sustainability is something which is important for everybody, and actually that importance is felt by finance functions wherever they are. Mm-hmm. So harnessing and opening that up for a greater debate in whatever company or sector or geography you're in is really helpful, and the awards play a great part in that.
How have the ideas of the winners translated into the benefits of creating value?
I think we are seeing very specifically some of the cases which have won have been very directly linked to investment and savings, whether those are actual savings on the replacement cost or whether it's in savings in water usage, for instance. And those are very clearly demonstrating of value created. I think some of the others, because of the very nature of them, are at an earlier stage, and so they're beginning to help the organisations think differently about the sustainability and that long-term cost. So different ones are more able to be measured, but very clearly there is a trend that the winners are ones where value is being added.
Russell Pico, the chairman of the judges of these awards, recently talked about the increasing involvement of the younger generation in the benefits that they are creating. And also you have the Innovative Idea Award, and that is changing. Could you just talk us through some of those ideas?
Last year, one of the teams brought in a couple of their finance graduates, and I think it was all of the judges were really impressed by the energy, the engagement, the creativity that those graduates were bringing, and the level of excitement of how they could think differently, really make a contribution through their day-to-day activities. And that's not to say you don't get that same passion and excitement actually from the CFO down, but I think it's very tangible when you see it in that graduate generation. The Innovative New Idea Award is something that changes every year. So every year we focus on a different type of area to try and draw out innovative ideas. This year the award is really targeted on those who are students, graduates, just starting out in their career in finance. And so thinking back to Finance for the Future, with this award we're really hoping to come up with some fantastic thinking and tap into the ideas of that new generation of finance professionals and see how they can demonstrate ideas that will really help to drive sustainable outcomes.
And how do organisations get the greatest benefits from being involved in these awards?
I think the benefit, first of all, it's something which the company has to, there has to be sponsorship at a senior level. There has to be a desire on the part of the CFO or the wider leadership team to support this. The benefit then is in the thinking that comes from asking the finance function, from involving the finance function in it. And you don't know what you're going to get when you set out on this, because usually it's something which is coming from that ground up basis. And I think if I think about the awards that have been those that have been won, the winners, if you like, in the categories, they're ones which have started from a genuine business issue which they're trying to resolve, which then translates into a project or a piece of work which the finance function has led, and then there's the business benefit. So that ground up area is probably the most important, rather than the top down, you're going to enter this award. It doesn't work like that. It has to be from the ground up, but that senior sponsorship is important.
The other thing that we do is really try to develop case studies and stories around the winners and the finalists to highlight to others and really showcase the examples of what can be done. And certainly through our work with A4S, we find that it is that storytelling, those case studies, those examples that people really want to see. And so being able to gather those stories and share them with others, I think we of course benefit from, because we can encourage more examples of that to be developed. But I think the organisations themselves clearly benefit from that as well.
And the finance for the future element is important here as well, that building of a knowledge and a thinking, and some people will learn from it, some will adopt exactly what's there, others will just learn and progress. And so finance for the future awards is the essence of what we're looking at.
And that inspiration, I think, came through last year, where a couple of the finalists had heard stories from some of the prior winners, had heard what they were doing, and had spent a couple of years thinking, how could I apply some of those ideas to my own organisation, and then had come back and entered themselves with the outcomes, which weren't exactly the same, but they'd really adapted, developed, tailored.
What advice would you give to anybody thinking of entering the awards?
I'd encourage anybody who's thinking of to enter. It's only through the entering of what you're doing that you get the benefit of this wider thinking, and give it a go.
If you are entering, remember that it is the Finance for the Future Awards, so do make sure that it is finance-led. It's always helpful to have the CFO and, you know, through to the graduate finance representatives, but really be sure that the finance team are front and centre. Absolutely, partnership is often key, and that partnership across the business, but it's finance for the future, so ultimately finance leads.
Jessica and Alan, thank you so much for your time and all you've been talking about today.
Thanks a lot, Robert.
That's all we have time for today. Thank you for watching.